David. Yeah, no, that's fine. My name's John Fraser. I have been Vice Chair Investigations of the Ghost Club and I'm currently on the SPR Spontaneous Cases Committee. I've done paranormal investigations for some time. I probably describe myself a paranormal researcher now.
My name's Hayley Stevens. I am a local ghost hunting skeptic who blogs.
I'm CJ, just in case anybody hasn't worked that out. I'm replacing Becky because she's not feeling so good, and I'm a recovering Ghostbuster.
I'm Steve Parsons. I'm still an active ghost hunter and alcoholic.
Thank you very much. So for a lot of what we're going to do on this debate is go over to the audience and try and get your questions. And when I ask you further questions, which will come up after my first question to this panel here, think of a question and also let me know if there's a particular member of the panel you'd like that question to go to. That member of the panel can answer it, and then any other members of the panel can chip in if they'd like to say something on that particular topic. But our opening question is, has ghost hunting achieved anything at all?
It very quickly got rid of the phenomenon known as orbs, at least to most groups, so it has achieved something. I would actually say it's actually achieved a lot more than we would think, because I don't personally think the only point of paranormal investigation, ghost hunting, is to change science. I don't think of any of us as being obvious. That's why we necessarily expected what we necessarily expected to do when we got involved in it. One of the things it can do is test our own belief system, which if we can reaffirm or change that in an objective way, that's very important. The second thing it can do is assist people who are in moments of stress when very unusual things are happening to them. Those two things are in themselves very important. I think we sometimes set the bar too high these days.
It's a good question. I think I say we as a wider community, offer some people the answers to the questions. So when they have experiences, we're able to supply some answers to that, and I think that's really important. And sometimes I think those people who have weird experiences, they just want someone to acknowledge that they've had weird experiences. So there being a community of people who investigate these experiences, I think just helps people to come to terms with what they've experienced, really, whatever that may be.
DVD sales. Actually, it got me a girlfriend, and I think that's a major achievement in any discipline. So.
I would argue that ghost hunting has actually achieved a great deal and has contributed a great deal. For one, we gave birth to the academic study of paranormal phenomena, a branch known as parapsychology, is our bastard offspring, and one which has come back to continually haunt us ever since. We have managed to, I said yesterday during the panel on parapsychology that it's Ghostbuster become Mythbuster, and we have managed to break some myths. John pointed that the orb is one, infrasound being another, and its role, or specifically the frequency role, the 19 hertz element, has, I think, been busted. And I think that those contributions do stand as credible contributions. But I also think it's worth pointing out that one of our negative achievements of ghost hunting, it must be the amount of harm that the hobby can do, that the activity can do in terms of psychological damage. When people rock up to haunted houses and declare the walls are running with blood, there are fetuses under your floor, and they're coming to get you. But give us £500 and we can come and save you.
I missed that marketing opportunity.
Me too.
Fantastic, thank you very much. That's a great opener. So I'm looking to the audience now to ask the really tough questions that are going to get these guys going. So, all right, hand up before I even asked for it. Fantastic. So we've got 2 hands up. Do we have the glamorous Sarah to come and run around with a microphone? No, we don't. Okay, so... right on cue. Fantastic. So I'm just going to... Oh, you've got your microphone. So the first hand up was a gentleman right at the back.
Can we alternate between front and back?
just to give Sarah some running time. And what I'd like you to do is ask you a question and then say who on the panel or which members of the panel you think are best placed to give an answer to that question.
Hi. Basically, I've been impressed with the amount of science you put behind, well, the science that you're using, the way that the methods that you're using. My question comes from the fact that I've been on a couple of shoddy ghost hunts where it's basically you feel like they've taken your money and then they've pleaded with some curtains to move, and it's been horrible, basically. And I'm just wondering, with the qualification that you do now, would it be a good idea to have some sort of voluntary group that they could be accredited to, that, you know, these ghost companies could be, because there seems to be a lot of them setting up and taking money off people.
Thank you very much for that question. So that question is around ghost companies who don't really fall under our remit as ASSAP. But I think the core of the question is, do ghost companies need any kind of reining in, I suppose?
I think ghost companies need to explain what they are. They are commercial organisations. They're ghost tourism, if you like. I'm not sure how you'd rein them in. They have they do what they do. They give people an experience of spending the night in a haunted house. But there is no way, if you're paying £40 a night to people, it's going to be in any way, strictly speaking, an objective experience. Even if they don't aim to trick. The logistics of the group is wrong. You've got too many first-timers. I don't believe there's anybody here that is thinking that this would be a serious way of doing paranormal investigation. It can probably be good fun as an opener, but other than that, it is what it is.
Would anyone like to add anything to that? CJ? Yeah.
There are people out there who'll pay £40 an hour for women to walk on them in high heels. It's not my thing. I don't particularly want to do that. So I don't really mind if ghost hunting groups cater towards people who want to pay to have a great experience and a great night. I don't think we should get too, judgmental about it. It's not the same thing as the kind of paranormal research that, say, Steve Parsons does. Well, usually, is it?
You don't do the walking on high heels anymore.
No. So, I'm not going to try and impose my personal ethical opinion. The thing that concerned me about your question was you said you paid to ghost hunt. And I must say that I don't think, apart from a couple of charity gigs, 3 or 4 charity gigs, I've ever paid anyone any money to go on a ghost hunt. Okay. So, one of the things I would say to you is that if you're actually conducting an investigation, the whole notion of going to a haunted location and taking part in a visual investigation might not be the best way to go about doing paranormal research. I think there are other methods which are cheaper, more effective, and might give you useful results. They might not be quite as thrilling as hanging around with a bunch of people in a dark, dubious basement in Coventry or wherever, while a medium says, "Oh, I can sense it, it's coming through the walls tonight, hold on." But, sorry, that was Phil Collins, not a medium. But anyway, we're getting there. One of the things I would definitely say that you could start doing very, very easily is start to research back through your newspaper archives, through your local area, look for forgotten cases from the 18th and 19th century, learn about local folklore, and then conduct your own investigations. And when you find something recent that comes up, you can talk to the witnesses in a sympathetic manner and attempt to replicate what happened. If you see a bit of footage on YouTube, you can try and do it at home, see if you can fake it. There's so many other options beyond paying a lot of money. But as I say, I have no personal problem with it.
Can I just briefly add that I do actually take part in 1 or 2 public access ghost investigations, and the reason I do them is because I've learned and discovered that people who go on these investigations are actually craving the majority are craving the experience, the spooky night out, the interactive, scary movie night with their friends. But there is an element within them that wants to learn a little more. And through the medium of entertainment, you can educate, edutainment, and you can provide people with explanations and offer them another opinion, another point of view, and draw them into the more serious side of investigation and encourage them towards organisations like ASSAP. So there is an argument for public access ghost investigation too.
I myself have run these things with friends where we've gone, stayed in a hotel, had a wonderful time, but you know, I don't think it's not a commercial operation. But as I say, I've got nothing against it. I think I should make a declaration of an interest that for a year and a bit, I think it was nearly 2 years, I worked for Richard Felix at Derby Jail, working week in, week out. Well, the high heels come later. That's later, Steve. But we worked there. Oh, God, I was just imagining Richard. No. Anyway, I worked at Richard Felix's Derby Jail. I probably met 500 or 600 interested ghost hunters. And, you know, yeah, I think there's some truth in what Steve says. But the way, if you want to stop commercial ghost hunting, offer better, cheaper commercial ghost hunts. At St Breville's Castle, about 4 or 5 years ago, a group started called Phantom Fest started offering wonderful nights for 25 quid. And at that time, the average eBay price was 150 quid. So outcompete them.
I think it's interesting though with the commercial ghost hunts, because a lot of the people who do them are also paranormal research groups who do the kind of the commercial stuff on the side, and you certainly see that. I've certainly seen research groups then start to do the commercial stuff where I feel there's almost like a pressure to provide results. So I don't know where that feedback's coming from, but in the news recently there was a story about that medium where a guy was caught in the attic banging on the roof. I don't know if you saw that, but you should look it up, but it's brilliant. And I think that happens more because there's this kind of expectation people to have this experience. And I think no matter whether or not you create like a registrar or an organisation they belong to, like was suggested in the question, I think that's an opt-in thing. So you're never going to stop these shoddy ghost hunts happening because people are going to have to opt in to do it. And there will be money, obviously there'll be membership fees and things like that, and people will have to go on training to keep the standard up. So I don't think that there is, I think if I was running one of these kind of ghost hunting companies where I was charging people 60 quid to go on a ghost hunting night, I don't feel that there would be any desire on my part to then spend money to become part of this organisation that would stop me from getting my customers to come back time and time and time again. So I'm not entirely sure that that idea would necessarily work.
So not commercially viable for them, but a kind of a soft entry for people possibly into, like yourself possibly, having been on these things and then come to an event like this. For me personally, I don't like necessarily what commercial ghost hunting companies do. What I do feel quite strongly is that if they're providing a safe and not too unethical environment for these types of activities that stop people from just going into people's houses as a group of friends and causing people harm, then actually there's an ethical case that can be made for ghost hunting companies. So now another question from this lady here. Oh right, fantastic, excellent. So we have Richard Freeman first. And you can say what your question is and to which member of the panel you'd like to ask the question.
This is for everybody. If Derek Okora was a midget, would he be a small, medium, and large?
Okay, if Derek Okora was a medium, would he be a... Okay, so Richard.
If Derek Okora was a midget, would he be a small, medium, and large?
I think one-word answers for this one.
I think the real question should be, is Derek Okora psychic?
Yeah, the real question should be, is Derek Okora psychic?
Hang on a minute. Derek should be burnt at the stake. The problem with mediums is they're neither rare nor well done.
Derek, actually off camera, is a really nice guy, and he does do a great deal for charity. I know there have been questions raised about Derek's mediumship, and I know that Derek, as as a fellow Scouser, has openly talked about the famous Mary loves Dick and other similar faux pas. But I'm not defending Derek, and I'm not making any judgments on his claims. But I would simply say that Derek genuinely believes in his abilities.
I think you can tell that by the way that every time in Most Haunted something spooky happens, like there's a sudden noise and he's not expecting it, he's like, oh, the spirits are angry, let's get out of here. No, it's not quite as camp as me, but the thing is that, has anyone ever noticed that Derek is scared of ghosts? Go back and watch Most Haunted. If anything happens he doesn't expect, Derek runs away in terror. Actually, I find him personally affable and a likeable chap, and I've worked with him.
I just think it's impressive that his spirit guide's name is I Am You Stand Backwards. Yeah. So, yeah.
Quick serious point. This is hopefully going to be about the future of ghost hunting and paranormal investigation. It's fun to talk about Derek Okura, but he is very much in the past.
That's a very good point, thank you. We all suitably chasing.
Felix would object to that. On the basis that they're flogging psychic and science is new tool.
Yes, yeah, good point, fantastic. So, further questions on the future of ghost hunting. So we have gentleman at the back and then followed by Robert. And what your question is and who it's directed to. And if we all say to everyone, we won't get too many questions in.
Okay, this is to Steve. CJ asked the panel yesterday a question about if you had a phone call right now with a family saying that they had apparitions and poltergeist activity, what would you do right now?
The standard answer to that is, and the normal genuine response is often to say, to listen with interest, explain how busy we are, and ask them to call back in a couple of weeks. The reason for that, we've found over the years, is that sifts out the thrill seekers, the attention seekers, and those who just want the ghost hunters to come round to the house for whatever reason. If they do call back, I mean, there are exceptions when it's obvious that we might have to do something a little quicker, but generally it's really busy. We really like to help you. You give us a call back in a couple of weeks.
I'd probably give a very similar answer to that actually, with a couple of extra steps. I'd probably ask them to keep a phenomena diary for a couple of weeks, and actually that helps them to try and understand the patterns in what's happening, and also check for any safeguarding issues that there might be in place. Okay, our next question is from Robert. And Sarah, I might just hand Robert the microphone from there. Okay, so what your question is, and who is it to?
Well, can I say to all the panels, I'm going to ask them a general question. What equipment do you find is useful in apparition study, and what equipment do you find is least useful or destructive in it?
Question I say someone would actually ask, so that's fantastic. So is any equipment useful in ghost study? Or is any equipment, and what particular equipment, if so?
I'm going to answer this question in a slightly different way. We don't know if what we're investigating exists, and if it exists, we don't know what it is. I think in some ways there's been too much debate about the exact type of equipment to use. I think the only equipment that's absolutely essential is Occam's razor. Now, does anyone not know what that is? You don't. Occam's razor is a modus operandi way of thinking about things. The simplest and the currently most accepted solution is the best one. We think when the sun sets, we don't think it's been obliterated out by the god. We know we understand the science and we accept it's a repeating thing. Now, I think the only thing a ghost hunter truly needs is rational and logical thought, which is best summed up by Occam's razor. Now, the rest of it is very much depends on what experiments are actually doing.
Okay, fantastic. Would anyone else on the panel like to contribute towards an answer to that question? Hayley, yeah. Hayley and Steve, fantastic. My contention on that one is that you need possibly camcorder, possibly a voice recorder, and if you have anything else, you should have a very, very good justification for why you have it.
I find I think you're spot on when John's spot on when he says that you need a good understanding of rational investigation. Why am I feeling that? It's just me. It's really weird. Maybe it's my necklace. Let me take that. I don't know. No, still doing it. Okay. Sorry about this. I think rational investigation is good. A good understanding of rational investigation. But actually, I also find it quite useful to have my iPhone on me or a smartphone, because you've got quite a lot of tools on there that you can use. You've got a voice recorder, you've got a camera, you can film, you can take notes. And also with UFO sightings and things like that, there are apps that you can download that tell you what satellites have been in that area at what time, what planetary bodies are in the sky, and so on and so forth. So that I think that's quite, it's kind of cheating almost, because it just fits into your pocket, but it's also quite useful because you can document so much on there.
Steve?
You mentioned the ghost radar. I've just actually dealt with this very question in the foyer some minutes before we came in, and my response then was, in my opinion, all of the equipment that ghost hunters, let's be honest, ghost hunters love their equipment. Clothes makers demand flight cases make it the ghost hunter. There is one area within the physical environment where we do have a genuine reason to explore and to document, and I would advocate that any serious investigator, now that in that I include those who are working with mediums in the seance rooms and also on spontaneous cases, start to concentrate and focus on accurately documenting temperature. Because if we look right the way back through the archive of psychical research, William Barrett and others, through Tyrrell Price, etc., there have been instances where accurately measured temperature using correct techniques and the correct equipment that was available was recording unusual temperature displacements, both up and down. Now, there are numerous problems with video and audio to the point where it's effectively been discredited. The EVP side of it has become almost laughable. The digital video and photography can be so played with and tinkered with, and I know Hayley's put many ghosts onto her blogs and Facebook pages because they are literally one button press and it can be done. But there is this genuine anomaly that exists, and so I would advocate, if you're going to take some equipment out on all of your ghost hunts, start documenting the temperature.
I'm going to say something. Question again, Dave.
Is there any equipment that's relevant to panel investigation?
For apparitional research, I think is the actual question. For apparitional research, I would suggest that you try and get hold of a copy of G.N.M. Tyrrell's book, Apparitions, Hornell Hart's essay, 6 Theories of Apparitions, that you may be able to find on the internet, and the 1894 report on the census of hallucinations. I think if you read through that literature and get a good understanding of what's been done before, then all you really need is a modern phone that can act as a dictaphone so you can interview witnesses, and a capacity to actually carry out, proper interviews with people who had experiences and record that data, and then you can analyse them in the framework of what the research has already been. I find that far more useful than IR, thermal imaging, and all of the other things that have been used today. That doesn't mean to say that I'm endorsing any of the parapsychological theories that are in those books. I just think it's a good idea to be familiar with the literature.
You should also add, when I spoke about taking photos and everything, it wasn't to capture the paranormal, it's so that you can document what you're doing and what's happening as it unfolds, basically.
And this image of CJ now going to investigations with flight cases full of Victorian paranormal books. It's fantastic, excellent. I think that's a really, really strong point there actually on the future of ghost investigation, that it's equipment light. I'm not sure even the panel's united on a single piece of useful equipment that you could take to an investigation, maybe one or two from one or two people, but actually I think possibly for the future of ghost investigation, this idea of going with a whole load of equipment is probably a dead idea now. I think we're probably united on that point. Any other questions to the panel? Please raise your hands. Yeah, okay, so we have Simon, and if you can say your question and who it's directed to, please.
It's directed to you and Mr. Fraser about, sorry, my language, I'm from here. I ask myself, the parapsychological research work is done. This raises kind of the bar and makes a professional impact about stuff you're researching in. I would say there is, at the point of a reputation and also in the point of possibilities, a difference between amateurs and professionals, especially in reputation. I don't want to offend anyone. And I ask myself, if you have done a perfectly good investigation, good documentation with perfect equipment, whatever, how far can you take something like this to be credited by the whole public society and especially scientists? Because I guess if you would have something, even if it's perfect and perfectly done, the scientists would say, well, you are an amateur, you don't know how to use the equipment, you don't know how to set up the right environment. So is there a perspective in this matter?
So everything was perfect, and I think probably the key is what you're saying was about credibility as well. I think there was a huge deficit of credibility within ghost investigation. However, if the methodology was right and all the recording was right, and you had credibility, then we would go to Professor French and say, well, what do you think? I'm not sure what you'd say to that. John?
I think I said in one of the earlier answers that we're a long way away from becoming a real science. I don't think a group of amateurs, which is what we are, some gifted, most of us gifted, all of us gifted that are here today, are going to achieve that. We currently do, however, have about 8 universities in the United Kingdom that have parapsychology or parapsychology related expertise, and that there are some things I think we should be using a lot more. I think we should be trying to drag them out into field research. They do sometimes seem a little bit obsessed to stay in the laboratories, and what we really need to do if we're going to get anywhere over and above parapsychology is try to find some way of encouraging a paraphysics department. Because if there is any objective reality to any of the paranormal, it will ultimately be proved by additions to physics theory. If we're going to get over and above what we are, which is going to be tricky, we must involve academics more, and they must involve themselves more.
Thank you very much for that question. Any further questions from the panel? We have Stephen. Sarah's just behind you. So your question and who it is to, please.
Actually, it's to everybody because it follows on from what the question about equipment. And I was just thinking, if you don't arrive with equipment or some scientific tangible, is there a danger that the person that you're talking to will think you're not taking their problem seriously? That's the first part of the question. And leading on from that, the psychology of the situation you put yourselves in, how do you exclude yourself as part of the psychodrama that you're stepping into?
Two very good questions. So we'll take maybe the first question first, which was around the expectations of the client potentially with equipment. I think that's absolutely right personally. I think there's been such an expectation created through television programs particularly that you will arrive with a van full of flight cases. My personal answer to that question is when you first begin to work with a client, if you talk about their expectations and your expectations very, very early on and make very clear about what it is you do and is that actually the service that they want, so they're giving full informed consent so there are no surprises when you begin to speak to them. That would be my answer to the first question. Would anyone else like to add to the first question?
I think it's absolutely true.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
I can say that it was true even before Most Haunted, because back in 1996 I drove down the long straight road to Cirencester with a full moon coming. We arrived at an isolated country house. The woman came to the door and she said, "Are you the Ghostbusters?" "We're here to investigate your spook."
That's why you got the shirt.
Yeah. And she said, "Well, where's your equipment?" And I had a notepad. And he had a camera. And we said, it's on another case. And she said, oh, okay then, come in. And I just got the idea that if we hadn't said it was on another case, she wouldn't have let us in. So he went home and built a little box that buzzed. We called it a condom, I can't remember if it still is. But it just picked up electrical resistance and played a tone depending on how far it was from an electrical field. It did nothing on a flashing box. We felt it was really virginal deception. We didn't take it in the end. We just came level and said, look, we're just going to take some photos, talk to you, have a cup of coffee, and try and let your children move home again, because they've moved in with grandparents. But it's a real, real problem. It absolutely is, and I think it probably has been compounded by TV.
Right, so part 2 of the question, how can we remove ourselves from the psychodrama of what's going on? How can we be involved in something if we're biased? And how can we analyse something if we're involved in the first place? Would anyone say CJ on that one? Anyone else as well? Yep. Okay, CJ first.
In one of the most successful investigations I ever did, we did everything we could not to remove ourselves, not to maintain objectivity. We actually set out, it was over a period of many, many months, and we actually went and lived with the family and worked with the family and worked in the pub and became part of the family unit. And we did that, and there was a team of us who took turns to disappear out of university and go and stay there and to become participants and to get involved in the family politics and in living and working together and being paid as normal employees so that we could, get to feel the case from the inside. So I think that's the absolute opposite of objectivity and removing yourself from the drama. Because every time you go in as an objective expert, the ghost flies out the window.
But how do you know that you're not contributing to eradicating the situation?
We may well be. We may have made it far worse. Ethically, it's a disaster area. From a research perspective, I'm so sorry your children were exploded by the head inspector, but at least we got it on camera. Back in those days, I was less concerned with ethics. I was more concerned with actually trying to calm down the situation in the long run by participating and by becoming part. So you become friends with the people, but that's almost inevitable. And if you've got a vulnerable client, it's really difficult if you're not trained. I mean, I was trained in boring stuff like, the NHS to actually deal with psychiatric nursing issues. But you still get involved with clients, even though there are all these things that are designed to keep you on a professional, relational basis. And that's something where the court comes in handy. It's inevitable that there's going to be empathy and sympathy.
I'm sort of kind of echoing CJ's comments, because the mere act of investigating changes the scenario. The mere fact that you've taken a team along, and you have to recognise that you will change the situation to some degree, and you have to mitigate that out as much as possible by the mechanisms that CJ's talked about. And also, there are little helpful ways in which you can stop it contaminating, if that's the correct word, the evidence that you're... And evidence is a word I really don't like, because we're not collecting evidence, we're collecting information. But we never tell anybody what to write. We might ask people to keep a diary. We certainly ask members of any investigation, and also the family and anybody else that's there, and we use the words, can you blog and tweet your way through the night, or your way through the time that we're here, and we give them no other information at all. We don't ask them to note anything of a particular interest. We don't ask them to, we just want to know, and we simply say it's because we want to know you're alive throughout the night. So if it's a blank piece of paper, we'll assume that you've been dead or asleep. And if you've been asleep, we want to know what you were dreaming about. Because if we ask them for anything, if we say, note down any unusual experience, we're heightening their awareness that we want their unusual experience, and so they become more focused on the unusual aspects of their experiences. So we just simply say, blog your way, every 5 or 10 minutes, write a little tweet, and you get really funny ones like, I really wish I could have had that burger. Steve is pissing me off tonight. And all manner of other things. But it gives you, and members of our team are trained psychologists, and it gives the investigation process an insight into the psychology, the mentality, and the processes that are going on with the witnesses, because at the end of the day we are there to test a claim of a human experience. I saw a ghost, I smelled a smell, I was touched, you can't explore that unless you have people there, hopefully under very similar circumstances.
I suppose I was thinking on a simple level of attention. Giving attention.
We are giving attention, absolutely, and we recognise that fact. The mere act of saying to somebody, will you please, Dave mentioned it before, will you please keep a diary? You are immediately getting people to focus on their own experiences day to day. And we recognise that the minute we ask people to keep a diary, we find an increase in the number of unusual experiences that they start reporting, because we've changed the situation. It's a compromise. We need the information, but we recognise that we're going to adjust the situation. And it's an inevitability of the investigation process, one that we try to mitigate out as much as possible, but we can't completely eradicate. We're trying to control chaos. And that's another achievement of ghost hunting. We are better at controlling chaos than many parapsychology experiments are at controlling them in laboratories.
Actually, just before I pass it on to Hayley, people often want us to impose meaning on their experience. They want us to be experts, they want us to be authorities. And one of the things I always try and get over is that I'm not a bullshit authority figure. I don't know much more than they do. All I can be is be a friend and listen sympathetically and try and record what's happening. So breaking down those expectations and managing those is a really important aspect. You can't treat people as objects in experiment. You have to treat them as, equals.
I'd just like to very quickly add, when there's a genuine cry for help, case as in they're in a panic, the subjectivity and their well-being should come before the objectivity of the experiment. Very briefly, we had a case, just changed council flats, actually been upgraded, single mother who couldn't stay there anymore, child staying with grandparents. She was a credible witness. We could have tried to stake the place out and get all kinds of evidence. We decided in the end the only way forward was to write a very credible letter to the council asking her to be transferred, and with the help of an MP as well, she did get a council house transfer. We got no real information as to the haunting for sure, but I think that was a good case in many ways.
Thank you very much. I think we've just got time for one more question. I've got one final question prepared, which is, I'd like to ask each member of the panel, what would they like the future of ghost hunting to be? If you had an influence to say, where should it go from here? So if you imagine you had every ghost hunter in the world, in this room, or sort of sat high in this room, and you had 2 minutes in front of them, what would you say to them? Who'd like to go first? Yeah, Hayley first.
The idea of having every ghost hunter in the world in one room is really, really scary, actually. I would probably run out the door. I don't think that there is one direction that ghost hunting or ghost investigation or paranormal research, whatever you want to call it, can go in. I think there's always going to be different approaches and different wants and so on, and people doing it for different reasons. And I think ghost research today reflects ghost research of the past, and I think that ghost research of the future will reflect ghost research of the present. So I think it's always going to be quite similar. And obviously there's no way that you can kind of control the whole community as a wider community. So you're always going to have different branches and different approaches. Of course, I would like to see ghost research as being more rational. I would like to see less of these new ghost hunting gadgets coming out, which happens all the time. Have you seen the new Ouija board on the spring? It's ridiculous. It's incredible. It's about 50 quid though, so I didn't get one. But this is always going to happen. I would like to see less of that, but I don't think it's, that's still going to continue to happen. So hopefully it will become more and more rational. People will start looking for logical causes rather than looking for ghosts, but who knows?
The future of ghost hunting, I think it's actually quite rosy, because the phenomena is still very, we don't understand very much about it. So as long as the question exists, there will be people seeking answers. Pliny documented 3,000 years ago the tale of a ghost hunter who took rental of the haunted house, and he spent time there and he investigated the ghost, and ultimately he laid that ghost. So as long as people keep reporting apparitions and ghostly encounters, I think there will always be the curious and the exploitative who will come along and want to try to understand the phenomena that people are reporting. If I had every ghost hunter in the room, what would I say to them? Keep going, because the more people... We don't know from which direction the answer will come. Yes, there are clearly some that are ludicrous, but there are some ludicrous directions within science, there are some ludicrous directions within lots of branches of research. But within those, all of those sort of disparate strands of investigation, there might be the one strand that might eventually lead us in the right direction towards a degree of understanding.
That sounded like a political speech.
I want the future of ghost hunting to be like Ghostbusters. I want to drive around the streets with a loud siren, you know, have women and make things go boom, and no, actually, I would like that. I don't think I'm going to get it. No.
I like universities because they give you loads of money and you don't have to produce any.
I've worked in the public sector. You don't understand, I've worked in the public sector, they expect results. Yeah, I quote that all the time. No, actually, what I would like to see is, there's been a number of recent papers that have intrigued me. I've critiqued many of them, I've disagreed with their authors, but I'd like to see more stuff like Barry Colvin's work, which on poltergeist acoustics, I'd like to see, because that was something that we could test, and that was something that leads to new avenues for research. And research builds upon previous research. I'd like to see more large-scale survey research. I'd like to see more experimental research. I'd like to see work in psychomantiums to try and understand the mechanism and the neurology and psychology of understanding how apparitional experience is generated. I'd like to see more interdisciplinary work on hallucinations with the medical community. There's just so many angles. Basically, I like things that are measurable, because they, you know, where we can replicate an experiment, where we can try things out. That's just me. What I'd like to see maybe a bit less of is sitting around in the dark waiting to see if the spook appears to us personally. But again, that's just me, because I get bored really easily and fall asleep. Thank you.
I already mentioned more cooperation with some universities and vice versa. I would actually extend that to more cooperation with any other groups who are willing to cast their open up their belief system for a second. That would include skeptical groups, spiritualist groups, and so on. I do think it should be a big tent. I think the perfect investigation includes elements of all types of people, so long as it's done under the auspices of Occam's razor. But the one other thing I would say is I think that a lot of apparitions type phenomena is always going to remain very ambiguous. And a bit like Christian, I'd like to get more emphasis on the stuff that is easier to measure. I've pulled together, if a book flies across the room, it's either a very clever fraud or it's something genuine. I think we should tend to concentrate on the unambiguous phenomena more than we do at present.
Thank you very much. And from my perspective, I think the kind of the summary is there, agreeing with Steve that this isn't going to go away. Certainly the results of ASSAP's national experience and opinion survey was that more people seem to be believing in ghosts, just as many people seem to be experiencing them. So I think it's going to carry on, as Steve says, for as long as people actually have those experiences. But I think that probably the conclusion from the panel is more rationalism, fewer gadgets, and more research.
And more money.
And more money, yes. Yes, absolutely. So I'd like you to put your hands together for the panel. Thank you very much.